Hi, my name's Vince Sheehan, and today I'd like to talk about the Beatles albums, the 13 albums released whilst they were still together, and I'd like to rank them in order, from my least favourite to my all-time favourite. So please join me on this journey, and please write down your own comments. I'm sure I'm going to upset some people, but let's take this in a spirit of good humour. And please click like and subscribe if this is your kind of thing. Now, first up, I'm going to go with Yellow Submarine, which was released in 1969. Now, Yellow Submarine's a bit of a funny album because, of course, it is the soundtrack for the animated film. And it uses two songs we know already from previous albums. Yellow Submarine, of course, the title track, and All You Need Is Love. So, it is a bit of an odd album. And of course, the second half is purely film music by George Martin. So let's take the Beatles songs first. Well, the two songs which have been released already I'll talk about with Revolver and The Magical Mystery Tour. I do like the two George Harrison songs, Only a Northern Song and It's All Too Much. Particularly It's Only a Northern Song. I think that's a really inventive song. I like the way it just continually confounds our expectations in a very knowing way, with the lyrics. As we hear the chords change in a funny way, Harrison singing about it. And I quite like that, actually. And that and It's All Too Much are just real kind of heavy hits of psychedelia. And in Only a Northern Song, I love the way, if you listen to how he sings His Hair Is Brown, we suddenly hear Harrison's voice harmonised on Brown. I always love that. I actually quite like All Together Now. I think that's a really charming song. But Hey Bulldog is a real belter. I think that's a really good Lennon and McCartney song. It's got a real kind of groove and a power behind it. If we're talking about This Is the Worst album, we are truly talking about a truly exceptional band. Now, I guess the second half isn't the Beatles at all, really. It's George Martin, and it's well worth a listen. Charming, light, classical pieces which fit beautifully with the film. There's very much an Eastern flavour, kind of George Harrison flavour in one or two of the tracks. I think he quotes Within You, Without You from Sgt. Pepper. There's also some interesting classical quotations as well, from the Bruch Violin Concerto and Bach's Air on a G-string, and I'm sure there's some others as well. And I particularly enjoy the March of the Meanies. So, Yellow Submarine, although it's my least favourite of all their albums, it's certainly worth a listen. Next up is Beatles for Sale from 1964. Now, again, it's a really good album. I mean, that's what's so great about the Beatles. Their quality was so consistently high. It's quite remarkable, really, considering how many albums they released in such a short time. And Beatles for Sale has got some terrific songs on. There's very much a kind of theme of self-loathing and paranoia about some of John Lennon's songs on this album, which is quite intriguing, such as No Reply and I'm a Loser, which are great songs. No Reply is just absolutely brilliant. Babies in Black, absolutely terrific as well. And of course 8 Days a Week with that brilliant intro and outro. Really great song. But Paul McCartney's song I'll Follow the Sun, which apparently is a very early song he wrote, is just such a beautiful song. So short but so beautiful, with an incredibly simple but effective guitar solo. I think where the album perhaps falls down a little bit is its use of covers. and particularly after a hard day's night, which was all originals of course. And you do get the sense that the Beatles were perhaps scrambling for songs to record due to their tight time constraints, which isn't their fault at all of course. And they sing the covers with gusto and effectively, but they're just not in the same league as the originals. So that is why Beatles for Sale, I think, is, although a great album by anyone's standards, not one of the true greats in the Beatles discography. Next up we've got With the Beatles, their second album, released in 1963. My goodness me, this has got great songs on it. One of the best album openers ever. It Won't Be Long. What an exciting track that is, with those repeated, it won't be long, yeah, 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 it won't be long now, yeah. You know, from Paul and John, it's just absolutely terrific, so exciting. I love All I've Got to Do. What a kind of gut-wrenching song that is. Kind of hits you, really poleaxes you, that song. All My Loving, of course, such an early expression of the genius of McCartney. And I really like Don't Bother Me by George Harrison. I'm a big fan of George Harrison's songs, and Don't Bother Me I think's got a real kind of dark edge to it. Apparently he wrote it when he was ill. As with Please Please Me and Beatles for Sale, the second half are predominantly covers. I love Paul McCartney's rendition of Till There Was You. It's beautifully performed, and John Lennon's Please Mr. Postman, a really great vocal performance. Some of the other covers I think aren't quite as exciting as those. That's why it's quite low down on my ranking. But my goodness me, again, wow, what a terrific album. Help is the next album I'd like to talk about. And you know, Help itself, this song is just amazing. What an opener to an album, just a masterpiece. And then it just carries on with a succession of great songs. I do like The Night Before by Paul. I like You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. I Need You by George Harrison. Not one of my favourite songs by him, but a worthy addition to this album. But Ticket to Ride, that is just a belter. That is just 5-star Beatles. What an incredible song that is. It's just another level, isn't it? I've Just Seen a Face I do really like as well, particularly the introduction. In like a few seconds, a whole world is opened up to us of beauty and awe in those guitar chords right at the beginning. But then the song has a more kind of country, straightforward feel. But wow, what the Beatles can make you feel in 2 minutes is just extraordinary. And Yesterday, of course, surely one of the greatest songs ever written. So this is a remarkable album. Perhaps it isn't as consistently strong as some of the other albums, but you know, again, this would be, for any other band, I'd be lucky to reach these heights. Next up we have Please Please Me, their debut album, 1963. And what impresses me about this album is the energy. It's well known that this was recorded in a day, the Beatles travelling down in the snow from Liverpool to London. But it just crackles with this youthful energy, this spirit, this aura of pure talent. It's such an impressive debut. And I think this album has got the best covers on, for a start, including, of course, the last track, Twist and Shout, where, you know, Lennon is almost on the verge of losing his voice. But it's also got the great original tracks. I Saw Her Standing There. What an amazing fun and joyous song that is. Love Me Do, of course, and Please Please Me, that is just an absolute belter. So the debut album, I think, is really special, and that's why I really think it's getting up the pecking order out of this extraordinary discography. Next up is Let It Be, released in 1970. The last album to be released by the Beatles, but was actually recorded before Abbey Road. And I'm currently watching the Peter Jackson documentary as well on the Disney Plus channel. So I'll probably do a separate video on that, which is absolutely fascinating. Let It Be, I think, is again just filled with amazing songs of genius. You've got Two of Us, what a beautiful song that is. Kind of about Lennon and McCartney. So poignant when you know how they've kind of drifted apart, but I guess when you watch this documentary you see them, or the film, you see them kind of coming together again. Definitely with some rough edges, but you can see them enjoying making music again. But Two of Us is such a touching song. And you've got Let It Be, of course, an absolute masterclass in writing a standard, I guess, a popular music standard. Paul McCartney was just so good at writing those kind of ballads. Just jaw-dropping, really, in its beauty. You got Get Back, which I've never been a massive fan of, actually, but it's nevertheless a really good song. And then if we look at the John Lennon songs, you've got Across the Universe, which is really beautiful, and you've got Dig a Pony. I just love Dig a Pony. I think that's just one of the greatest later songs of the Beatles. I really think that's a great song. This album gets a lot of flack about its overproduction by, kind of, I suppose, post-production by Phil Spector. You know, I've just got used to it, to be honest. I know there's the kind of naked version of the album as well, but The Long and Winding Road I've always found to be very beautiful. I know it's sentimental, but it does get me, and I think the production has a lot to do with that. As with I Me Mine, which I think is one of George Harrison's best songs. I think on the negative side, I've never really enjoyed the little jokey bits and the kind of half songs, the kind of little ditties they've stuck on there. I think they're a bit of a waste of time, and I think For You Blue isn't a good song. I don't think that should have been included at all. I think Don't Let Me Down should have been included, which was included on the later version, the naked version. But again, just repeating what I said before, if this was another group's best album, you know, you'd be screaming about them from the rooftops. Next up, we've got the White Album, or strictly speaking, the Beatles, the double album. Now, this album has got its die-hard advocates and also the people who say perhaps it should have just been kind of stripped back to one disc. I tend to agree with the latter, if I'm being honest. I think there's a lot of fluff on this album. There's some greatness. I love Back in the USSR. I love George Harrison's While My Guitar Gently Weeps. I was obsessed with that song when I first heard it as a teenager. Happiness is a Warm Gun. That's an incredibly inventive and sophisticated Lennon track. Mother Nature's Son. Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except Me and My Monkey. Sexy Sadie. What an interesting chord progression. I think lifted by Radiohead for Karma Police about 30 years later, or whatever it was. And I love the John Lennon song Cry Baby Cry. I think that's just so beautiful. But there's just a lot of unnecessary and inconsequential fluff, half-finished songs, schmaltzy, sentimental ballads on this album as well. So it's never been a favourite of mine. although it's got greatness on it, it's not uniformly great, the White Album, in my humble opinion. And then we have Rubber Soul. Rubber Soul really, from 1965, is just a bit of a watershed moment for popular music. The Beatles are really stretching their wings from the perfect pop songs of the early 60s, but now experimenting a bit more, delving a bit more deeply into the human condition in their lyrics, and the songs are stretching the boundaries in terms of their melodies and their structures. Drive My Car, I think, is one of the greatest album openers ever. What an amazing song that is. Nowhere Man I Love, and Michelle and Girl are beautiful songs. I think the true highlight of this album is In My Life. This is a song which encapsulates the development of the Beatles from 64 to 65, and that's not, of course, dismissing 1964, because, well, you'll hear in a minute how much I think about A Hard Day's Night, but In My Life is just such a masterpiece of songwriting, such a beautiful melody, lyrics, chord progression, and fabulously intricate clavichord solo by George Martin as well. A real masterpiece. A Hard Day's Night is simply a perfect pop album, and by pop I mean short, melodic, catchy songs which can make you forget about your worries for a time. I mean, that's the joy of music, isn't it? To take you somewhere else. And my goodness me, A Hard Day's Night does that. And the song itself, the opener, A Hard Day's Night, a title coined by Ringo, just a revolutionary song. It's got everything. It's got an unforgettable melody. It's got an infectious beat to the tune, which you can dance to. There's a rawness and immediacy to the vocal delivery. The introduction and the outro, absolutely mind-blowing. That famous chord at the beginning, played on the 12-string Rickenbacker, I think, by George Harrison. That chiming ending to the song as well. It just makes this song the perfect pop song on the perfect pop album. It really is that good. And then things just carry on. I Should Have Known Better. A great song. If I Fell, I think that's absolute genius, that song. The way it opens with those quite unusual chord choices. If I fell in love with you, da, 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 help me understand. It's almost as if the key's uncertain to begin with, and then it goes into a more standard chord progression. But then it just builds to such an emotional climax, that song. When Lennon sings of the pain, it's just such an incredible composition in such a short space of time, 2 minutes or whatever it is. That's what's so brilliant about the Beatles, particularly in the early years, is that everything was so concise and to the point. There's not an ounce of fat on any of the songs. They're just perfectly formed masterpieces. And I Love Her, beautiful McCartney song, with these dark minor key shades to it. Can't Buy Me Love, what an infectious rocker that is. And side 2, Anytime at All, wow, I love that song so much. Again, it's like many of the Lennon songs, there's just this rawness, this immediacy, the emotion which really kind of punches you in the gut. Things We Said Today, wow, McCartney again, just these minor, major figurations in the chords, this kind of ambiguity there. It's just so beautiful, the music. Such an amazing melody and the vocal harmony in there as well, brilliant. And the album just, it blazes away to the end. Hard Day's Night, you can't get much better than that. Whatever genre, whatever band, whatever composer you're looking at, this has it all. Abbey Road, the last album to be recorded, but the penultimate album to be released in 1969, is really an awesome farewell by the Beatles to their adoring public. I mean, I know Let It Be came afterwards, but Abbey Road really is the Beatles signing off. And taken as a whole, the album just really has this amazing power and beauty and poignancy to it, I think. Probably because it is the last time they were recorded together as a foursome, but also the way the album ends with that medley, which I'll talk about in a minute. But first of all, side one, you've got Come Together, one of the most instantly recognisable Beatles songs ever written, with that riff and that kind of rattling sound, almost like a rattlesnake in the background. I mean, to be honest, it's not my favourite Beatles song. It's not one of my favourites, but it has continued to inspire countless covers, etc. Something I think is just absolutely outstandingly beautiful. I think this is really George Harrison up there with the best of Lennon and McCartney in this song. Again, the chord progressions are just wonderful. They really take you to another place in that song. Maxwell Silverhammer, I've never been a big fan of, but you know, it's perfectly charming. And you know, if you watch the Let It Be documentary where they're recording that, and by the way, a lot of these songs you hear on the Let It Be documentary, the Peter Jackson film, you see Mal Evans, their kind of personal assistant, banging away on the anvil, which features heavily in that song. Oh Darling, I find rather trite and backward looking. It doesn't do a lot for me, that song, if I'm being honest. Octopus's Garden is charming. It's one of my favourite Ringo songs. I think the first side closes in a magnificent way with I Want You, She's So Heavy. Just the way the chorus and the outro, which seems to go on forever, has that incredibly heavy, hypnotic riff, which kind of goes round in a circle with these arpeggiated guitars, which I just think is just a chord progression of genius. I love interesting chord progressions in songs, and that is one of the best, I think, in pop music. Side 2 begins with another George Harrison masterpiece, Here Comes the Sun. The two Harrison songs on here are absolutely extraordinary, because I think is jaw-droppingly beautiful to hear the 4-part harmony in that beautifully produced song. The perfect voice leading and some of the cadences in that song goes to an imperfect cadence at one point. So beautiful. And then we come on to the medley, which, if you take it as a whole, is just a beautifully moving way to end a Beatles album, and indeed their whole recording output, their whole discography. You Never Give Me Your Money is just really beautiful. I guess the lyrics are kind of very much wrapped in the financial ins and outs and the bickering of that time amongst the Beatles after Brian Epstein's death. But the music's just beautiful. The melody's beautiful. I love the way it ends with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all good children go to heaven. Such an expressive song. And then Sun King comes in, which I have to say I'm not a big fan of. It sounds a bit like a rip-off to Fleetwood Mac's Albatross to me. And I think the other song which is similar, Because, I think is far superior to that. Mean Mr. Mustard I just absolutely adore. Just perfect the way it is, just that minute or whatever it is, with Lennon's sneering vocals, with those deranged lyrics and that kind of driving impetus to the song. I just absolutely adore it. And Polythene Pam I quite enjoy as well, as a bit of fun. She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, a really good McCartney song. And then we come to Golden Slumbers. It's heart-achingly beautiful. You know, even thinking about this song brings a tear to the eye. It's just so perfect and so moving, and really just points to a more beautiful place, that song, than the world we live in. It's just it's just the very best of music, I think. Carry That Weight, I guess anywhere else wouldn't be that impressive, but because it's at the end and it's a culmination of this this album, indeed the Beatles' career, it really packs an emotional wallop. And hearing all the Beatles getting involved with different, you know, playing their own guitar solos, and Ringo Starr's drum solo, and then going into the end where, you know, their work's basically summed up in love. It's just so beautiful and so powerful and so moving. And Her Majesty at the end, I just adore as well, even though it's a few seconds long. So Abbey Road, I think this is definitely an album which is, even though the parts are beautiful and wonderful, you know, perhaps not uniformly so all the way through the album, but the whole just overwhelms you, I think. Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, well, it needs no introduction from someone like me, but oh my goodness me. Imagine hearing this in 1967. Imagine being completely bowled over by this new sound that was hinted at perhaps in Rubber Soul and then Revolver, but then just Pandora's box being opened and pop music never being the same again. The way the Beatles used the studio as an extra instrument, which enabled them then to make the arrangements and the forms of the songs that much more fascinating and adventurous and experimental. The way the music has this kind of vaudeville music hall kind of lens, which it's filtered through, but then also very much through the contemporary sense that pop music and could really change the world. The sense of the mind being taken somewhere else through the use of drugs as well, it can't be discounted, as well as interest in Indian music and Indian modes, etc. This album really is the apotheosis of that time, I guess, you know, the summer of love. But it's an album of far more significance than a particular year or even a particular decade. It's that important. Now, having said that, it's not actually my favourite Beatles album. And, you know, if you've made it this far and you're watching this, you're probably thinking, well, what does this guy know? Surely Sergeant Pepper must be number one. Well, as much as I admire the album and appreciate its importance, I think the album is far more than the sum of its parts. And there are other albums, I think, which have got a more uniformly higher standard of songs than Sergeant Pepper's, which of course is extremely high. You know, I'm talking in relative terms to other Beatles albums here. But it is unique in its kind of concept, I suppose. You know, it's a kind of concept album, and there's very much a unity in this album because of that. Perhaps by and large because of the opening track and its reprise later on in the album, which is a fine opener but I don't think it's of the highest inspiration from the Beatles by any stretch. I do think With a Little Help from My Friends is the best song Ringo sang. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is an absolute 5-star masterpiece. What an extraordinary composition that is. You know, remarkable for its use of instrumentation, the use of Indian instruments, keyboards, the way the meter changes between the verses in 3 and the choruses in 4, indeed the key changed as well. But it all just sounds so natural and unforced, and just an outpouring of brilliance. Getting Better and Fixing a Hole have never been my favourite Beatles songs, but they serve their purpose on the album. They're fine songs. She's Leaving Home is just I think one of the most beautifully touching and atmospheric and evocative songs the Beatles ever recorded. I think apparently based on a newspaper story. With the harp as well, it's just got such this bittersweet, timeless feel, melancholy feel to that song. It's just extraordinary. Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, I absolutely love. Lennon apparently had a poster from the early 20th century of different acts at this show in Bishopsgate in London, and you know, his use of that poster in making up this incredible piece of studio wizardry, and very much I think an affectionate nod to English music of the past, but very much put through a psychedelic filter. I just think it's an extraordinary achievement. Side 2, Within You Without You, never been one of my favourite Harrison tracks, I have to be honest. I prefer Revolver's Love You Too in terms of the Indian tracks. When I'm 64, I think it's absolutely delightful. I love the clarinets in that song. Lovely Rita, I just absolutely adore. I think that is such a often overlooked, but so tuneful, so melodic, so fresh, and so fun, that song. In a very odd way, I find it very moving. Good Morning, Good Morning, interesting time signature in that. A couple of the bars are in, make the music sound rather off kilter. It's a good song. But of course, the real jewel in the crown of this album is A Day in a Life, which it's just that the Beatles are here, and the very best of the Beatles is here. Day in a Life is kind of up there, you know. It's up there with the very best works of. I'm a classical musician by training, but in my opinion, it's just up there with the best of the great classical pieces of Bach and Mozart and Beethoven and Stravinsky. It's just so incredible, that song, and the way that Lennon's part works with McCartney's. You know, got up, got out of bed, dragged the comb across my head. Just fits in so beautifully, with the orchestral noise as well, and the way the album ends with those weird noises and that chattering. It's just unforgettable. This is a great example of an album ending in an indescribably sophisticated and beautiful way. Magical Mystery Tour, strictly speaking, isn't an album at all. It was a double EP consisting of the tracks from which were used in the film of the same name, but when it was released in America, they added some Beatles singles around about that time, and that's the version I'm talking about. the kind of full LP version, if you like. And I suppose when you compare this to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, there isn't that unity or cohesion in the album. You couldn't describe this as a concept album in the way you could arguably describe Sgt. Pepper's. But in my opinion, this album has got more exceptional songs than Sgt. Pepper, even an album as strong as that. How do I argue my case? Well, for a start, even though they weren't intended for an album, it's got Strawberry Fields Forever, which is just an astonishing track, and as you know, an astonishing piece of music which just heralded a sea change for the Beatles and pop music in general, and has got to be one of the greatest songs ever written in terms of its importance and its sheer brilliance. And coupled with that, you've got Penny Lane, of course, and a terrific song, McCartney at his best. So, two incredible tracks, two of the true jewels in the Beatles catalogue on this album. But not only that, on the first side you've got I'm the Walrus, an absolute peak in the Himalayas of great Beatles songs. A complete one-off, a complete original piece of genius, where the lyrics and the music seem to meet perfectly. And with these sinuous string lines, with that Mobius loop kind of chord progression at the end, it is just an astounding and outstanding piece of art. So you've got I'm the Walrus, Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane, and you've got perhaps the lesser songs but still great. The Fall on the Hill, really beautiful. Blue Jay Way by George Harrison, I think, is a really dark and a disorientating song, but I really love the way it builds throughout the song. The way the instruments come in with each verse. Your Mother Should Know, I think, is really beautiful, really catchy. Perhaps not developed as much as it could be, but a lovely melody. And I think the only real tracks that perhaps let it down a little bit are Flying, which is a kind of forgettable instrumental, and Baby You're a Rich Man. I've never liked that song. It's one of my least favourite Beatles songs. My least favourite is the Ballad of John and Yoko, but that's for another video. And All You Need Is Love is, of course, a rousing and unforgettable close to this album. So, perhaps somewhat controversially, I actually prefer Magical Mystery Tour to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Which brings me on to my favourite Beatles album, which is Revolver from 1966. I think if there ever was a perfect marriage of pop and rock, this album is it. Also, it comes at a time when the Beatles' earlier perfectly formed pop songs were meeting the more experimental side of their natures, which dominated their later years, and Revolver is at that crossroads, which makes it such a fascinating, enjoyable and beautiful listen. And there's not a bad song on the album. Taxman, a great George Harrison song, ripped off amongst others by the Jam, but yeah, great song. Eleanor Rigby just takes what a pop song can do just to another level. The lyrics are so haunting about loneliness. A far cry from the lyrical content of their earlier songs, which are all about love, of course. But this really is music and songs which are really probing the depths of the human heart. It's such a beautiful song with that beautiful string arrangement as well. I'm Only Sleeping, a really lovely song by Lennon. You know, perhaps just wanting to be left alone. And you know, who can blame him after those years of touring? Love You Too is, I think, the better of the two strictly Indian George Harrison songs. I think it's more concise and very influential on other acts, other bands subsequently who turned to the East for inspiration. Here, There and Everywhere is just perfection in a pop song. It's just a perfect marriage of structure, melody and lyrics. It really is jaw-droppingly beautiful. I just think it's the most beautiful ballad ever written. Yellow Submarine is just fun, you know, a great Ringo addition. She Said, it's got such a great psychedelic feel to it. And then side two, it's got Good Day Sunshine, a song which is, again, like the really interesting changes in meter, in time signature, but it just sounds so natural and unforced. You know, that's the greatness of the Beatles. They could do these sophisticated things, but always in the service of the song, not to make a point about how clever they are. And Your Bird Can Sing, there's terrific dual lead guitar parts there in that song. For No One, another beautiful McCartney song with a lovely French horn solo. Dr. Robert, you know, again, a really good song. I Want to Tell You, one of my favourite Harrison songs. Really, again, like a lot of Harrison songs, he really does interesting things with his choice of chords, his relationship between chords, they make interesting progressions. Got to Get You Into My Life, kind of Motown influence track with great brass parts. And then finally, the album just goes into another world with Tomorrow Never Knows, which is just so incredible in its inventiveness. Musically very simple, just really basically one or two chords and this hypnotic drum track. But then with all these loops coming in and out, seagulls, backward guitars, Lennon's droning vocals, it really is an unforgettable end to this perfect album, and what is, in my opinion, not only the greatest Beatles album, but probably the greatest album ever, full stop. That's how great I think it is. If you've watched this, thank you for being kind enough to listen to me, and please let me know what your favourite Beatles albums are, what your ranking would be. It's been great fun to talk about them, and if you like this kind of thing, please click like and subscribe. Okay, thanks a lot, bye.